And I call the member for Lawler.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak today about a subject dear to my heart and dear to the hearts of parents and teachers in the 53 schools within the electorate of Lawler. Deputy Speaker, I speak of education funding reform. I wish I could talk about the impact of high expectations on student learning, on the impact of the meta-analysis of Professor Robert Mazzano and Professor John Hattie. I wish I could talk about the impact that it had on schools. I wish I could rise today to speak about this in a real and useful way. But unfortunately, this vitally important issue has been reduced to a mere debacle by those opposite. There have been backflips, half-pikes with twists, all used to obfuscate this critical policy area during and since the election campaign. In the process, the Prime Minister and the Minister for Education have made and broken promises, leaving school leaders in every state and territory of our nation trying to read the words, read between the lines, infer, guess what the future will be for their schools. Let me summarise, Deputy Speaker. In the last 3 years, while the Gillard government conducted an exhaustive education review that attracted 7,000 submissions, in his capacity as Shadow Minister, the member for Sturt asked just 3 questions about education.
Shame.
On release of the Gonski report, the same member took just minutes to dismiss it as a con. When better schools proved critical to voters, they did a U-turn and promised a unity ticket, even though it was 2 years and many $1 million short. After taking government, we heard Minister Pyne talking about curriculum, specifically the history curriculum. Yes, Deputy Speaker, that old chestnut. Predictably, this stole the headlines, while the undoing of the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, ACARA, went unnoticed. Next, he was backflipping on the now non-unity ticket and saying he needed to go back to the drawing board of the previous Liberal government. Then we have the Prime Minister saying he didn't promise anything. Or maybe he did and we misheard him. Or maybe, Deputy Speaker, we all just imagined it. Anyway, the Prime Minister would only keep the promise that he hadn't made, that we had imagined but that no one had heard. And then yesterday, Deputy Speaker, he declared he would fulfil the misheard promise that maybe had been made after all. Now he's telling us he will go one better and find the money for the state governments who have shown their contempt for student learning by putting politics over progress. But, Deputy Speaker, it's still not unity. It's another new promise, this time to our state premiers, that they don't need to spend money on education after all. Deputy Speaker, I'm tired just trying to make sense of it all. But not trying to make sense of it is not a luxury that we can afford. Not for the parents of our students or the committed educators. They need to know so they can plan and implement programs to give every child the best chance in life. Yep. The most damning thing of all in this circus charading as policy is what lies behind the shenanigans. There are a couple of giveaways, Deputy Speaker. The destruction of ACARA as an independent body working with states and territories and putting in place a critical data source to tell the story of our schools and of disparity amongst them. This, Deputy Speaker, and Minister Pyne's assertion that Australia does not have an equity issue are the keys to this protracted mess. It tells us much about this government's plans for education. They are not interested in addressing inequity. They are acting to enshrine it by hiding it and denying it. But the My School website and the ACARA data have been available for a long time, and schools have been tracking their progress against national and state benchmarks for years. I want to share today the story of 2 schools I visited in my electorate last week. Both have made good use of national partnerships, Bunny and Victorian equity funding over the past 4 years. The first is Westgrove Primary School. The principal is Lila Gray. In 2009, Westgrove had an ISCIA Index of Community Socio-Economic Advantage ranking of 989, and their Grade 3 students performed below average in reading, writing and numeracy. By 2012, it has an ISCIA ranking of 956. The measure of disadvantage had in fact increased, and yet the Grade 3 students performed above state average in reading, writing and numeracy in 2013. The second is Iramu Primary School. The principal is Moira Findlay. 4 years ago, this school had an ISCIA ranking of 940 and Grade 5 students performed 50 points below the state average in reading, writing and numeracy. In 2012, it has an ICSIA rating of 928. Again, the measure
Order. Member for Lawler's time has expired.